So it seems a lot of people kind of have this thing they're talking about in the Kingdom Hearts community as of late. Now, I have a lot of friends, I see a lot of mutuals talking about it, so I thought I'd go ahead and give my 2 cents about the topic as well. Does Kingdom Hearts 1 need a remake? Now, I started looking through a lot of different threads, asking some friends, and trying to just get a good idea of what parts of Kingdom Hearts 1 would make someone feel it needs a remake in this day and age. Now, it has been 20 years since the game came out, and most people think that 20 years is, I think, long enough, time to go ahead and remake a game. There are some games that come out, earlier than that's having a remake. The Last of Us is having a remake, and so why not this game? So I can understand why some people saying that a 20-year-old game getting a remake shouldn't sound that crazy. So I kind of want to bring up the arguments that some people are saying in regards to it needing a remake. Things they find about Kingdom Hearts 1 that make it hard to go back to, or even some people playing it for the first time make it harder to get into, especially after playing some more modern games nowadays. So the first thing I see a lot of people talking about is the clunky camera. Now this, I kind of feel like it's a nitpick, but I can kind of understand where they're coming from. Maybe it's because, how it works in regards with lock on and not being able to really move it like that, or just the speed in which it moves and just how the general rotation feels. I've seen some people call it nauseating, but I've never really got that feeling, so I kind of just feel it's a nitpick and an over exaggeration. So I kind of can't agree with this one. So I don't really think Kingdom Hearts 1 has a clunky camera personally. What I do think I can kind of understand though is the next point, that being clunky movement. Now, I can understand that the weight of Kingdom Hearts 1 is very different in regards to like the rest of the series. If you were to play Kingdom Hearts 1 and then you go play Kingdom Hearts 2, it's literally night and day how they handle it. But I've always found the more weighted movement of Kingdom Hearts 1 to be part of its charm. I feel like the weight isn't just there between, the animation style of Sora running around and things like that. I think it really added into the impact behind each hit in actual combat of the game. And I found that to be really interesting. So I didn't really consider that being a point that people would point towards as a flaw of the game. I always found it aiding into how I perform my combos and things. In Kingdom Hearts 2 or Kingdom Hearts 3, you could dang near stay in the air for a long freaking time, but in Kingdom Hearts 1, when you're about to fall back down to the ground, and I find that to just be very consistent, so I kind of enjoy that about it. So I kind of can't say it has clunky movement either, especially if we're not even talking combat. Let's talk more dodge rolls. I feel like the dodge roll is quite refined in this game, and I never find myself in this game feeling like in combat when I take damage, it's the game's fault. I never feel that way. If I take damage, or I didn't learn the matchup right or something like that, my dodge roll didn't end up saving me, I don't feel like it was because of the game, and its clunky movement system. I feel like it was more my fault for not timing it better. Maybe I shouldn't have gone with a dodge roll. Maybe I should have gone with a guard or something like that. Things like that. And Kingdom Hearts 1 seems to be solid all around in the movement department for me. And while we might not be able to, do flow motion and all kinds of other stuff or run up walls, I can't necessarily call the game clunky because the movement is never something that hinders the gameplay for me. So I gotta disagree with that one as well. But the next point I will 100% agree with, and that's the FOV being too low. The FOV being the field of view, for those that don't know. The field of view is essentially how close the camera is to its primary target in the game. So as you can kind of tell, Kingdom Hearts 1's FOV is very low because the camera is right up against Sora. And now again, the game was designed around this. However, if you've seen, my retrospective that I just recently did, you can kind of tell that I'm not the biggest fan of this, because with playing the PC version of the game, I was actually able to mod apply a mod to the game where I can actually use an FOV mod that pulls the camera back like later entries in the series, and I genuinely think this makes the game play a bit better. You know, I don't feel so claustrophobic with the design. Maybe it's because a lot of modern games nowadays include FOV sliders and stuff like that that generally make you be able to see as much as you want, but I feel in action games having a higher FOV is overall just for the best, because if I'm playing an action game where I'm fighting multiple enemies at once, being able to see more of my environment and just exactly where a lot of enemies are, I feel like, you know, the further out the better. You know, it just gives me more general senses on where everything is at and what I want to do. You know, if it's too close to Sora, something could be right behind me or right to my side, but it's a blind spot because the camera is so zoomed in. Now the counter argument is Kingdom Hearts 1 was designed around this closer, this lower FOV, and if you also watch that retrospective I talked about with this mod, the downside is though sometimes at very specific moments it never hindered my gameplay, but there were times when there was certain obstructions happening, like a wall I passed by, or you know, a different part of, you know, the environment decal, you know, was in the camera kind of obstructing my view of Sora. Now this didn't happen often, but it did happen a few times to where I could take note of this. So again, Kingdom Hearts 1 was not designed around a higher FOV, so you should never be losing because of the FOV, but I do think a higher FOV for it would just be a general quality of life improvement. So I still agree with the point. I do think the FOV is too zoomed in. Now here's one that I kind of understand, but not fully sure I agree with. Sora sounds too young in retrospect with Rechain of Memories in mind, since his voice is so much deeper when it takes place seemingly hours after Kingdom Hearts 1. This one I can kind of understand. Imagine you're playing Kingdom Hearts for the first time in 2022, you get the most recent collection, the all-in-one, and you go ahead and just play the games in order as you see them. You're gonna wonder, wow, did this game take a long time to come out? Why does he sound so much deeper now? You know, it makes it sound inconsistent. Like, did the actor for him, did they get a different actor for him? You know, especially since, you know, this was still a PS2 game. Did, you know, did his voice just change that crazy? You know, but I can understand that from that perspective. But, you know, the deeper, you know, a scenario around that isn't exactly linear. As you know, originally the sequel to Kingdom Hearts was made for the Game Boy Advance, and in the end, Rechain of Memories is a remake of that Game Boy Advance adventure after the events of, after the making of Kingdom Hearts 2. So of course, while he did have a deeper voice in Kingdom Hearts 2 as well, enough time had passed, because again, Kingdom Hearts 1 came out in 2002. So it had been a little bit since then. So I think there was, you know, 4 or 5 years is long enough for the actor to have gone through, you know, a voice change. So that makes sense to me. So I know even though it's a remake of the second game in the series, it makes sense realistically why he sounds a bit different, you know, and I get why they might want to redub Kingdom Hearts 1, because at that point, if you just redub him now, then he'd sound more consistent with the game right afterwards, than the one after that, etc., etc. For some people might be, you know, kind of jarring to switch between the two. It also feels jarring later on too, because you have Kingdom Hearts 1 Sora in something like Recoded, yet he has a deep voice when he's supposed to be KH1 Sora. I know it's more technicalities around it being Data Sora, but why does Data Sora, the same Sora from KH1 essentially, just a data version, you know, why does he have a deep voice when Sora didn't have a deep voice back then? You know, just, it's little things like that. I can get it. There's a slight inconsistency with it. I think it's passable, and I think it's a legit exaggeration, but I can also understand it. So I'm in the vein of, if they do change this, I wouldn't complain. Would I ask for this change? Probably not. I think the general voice acting of Kingdom Hearts 1 is fine all around, so I don't really need them to touch it at all, if I'm honest. But if they did do it, I wouldn't complain. I mean, I'd note that, hey, they redubbed this whole game. That's kind of cool. And that's it. That's probably all I'd say. But what I do think should be changed for a Kingdom Hearts remake is something else a lot of people have been talking about, and that is the platformer based level design. If you've watched my retrospective, you know thoroughly how I feel about this, so I won't repeat myself here too much. But basically, with the origin of Kingdom Hearts' inspiration being Super Mario 64, they kind of seemed like they had this infatuation with platformer-based level design around the world. Now, I love platformers. I've been playing platformers for over 20 years, and the thing about it is I think that they always have their place in literally every game. I genuinely feel they do. Platformers can basically be any kind. There's no one type of platformer. Platformer doesn't always necessarily mean Mario or Sonic either. I think they can apply to essentially everything. But I always feel that platformer-based level design should only be, really put into a game if it aids in the level design or world design of this level. Like, say for example, while I don't care for Tarzan's world in Kingdom Hearts 1 that much, I do think that the platform based level design makes sense in universe. If I was playing in a jungle, if I was out in the jungle in real life, I probably would need to jump around here, or maybe need to swing on a vine there. That makes sense. It genuinely does. Does that make it good? Not necessarily. It just means it makes sense that it's there. Though I do think that it is in some worlds that it doesn't need to be in. I can understand why in the future they moved away from this platformer based level design. I think it's not necessarily a blemish on the game, but it is something that makes it stand out from the others. But I understand why they didn't go that route any further than this. But if they were to remake Kingdom Hearts, I would want it to be more wise with its level design. Fix up Monstro, retweak, Tarzan's world a little bit, just to make sure it aids in the level design. Because I don't feel that some of the platformer-based design in this game fully aids everything that it's trying to do. It doesn't make it any better, so you might as well omit it if it's not going to affect its quality. That's just my personal take on it. I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments though. But another thing that I'm kind of iffy on about this particular comment is that people are saying that they'll be able to add more allusions to future games, since Kingdom Hearts 1 was made originally in a way that it could be a single standalone game and not a series. I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, I feel that Nomura and team have really proven that with everything they put into Kingdom Hearts 1, there's still so much of it being still brought up today. Again, with Strelitzia being able to be, in unreality and everything like that, is because of the arc she was put in back in Union Cross, the arc that we first see in Kingdom Hearts 1, which seemingly has no significance to the entire rest of the series until it was brought up in Union Cross in recent years. So it just goes to show, I still feel like there's plenty in KH1 they can make use of to really add allusions to future games. And I feel like a lot of things they've added in Kingdom Hearts 1 did come into play later on. So I don't understand how much more allusions they need to add. If anything, it'll feel like something feels so artificial. Kingdom Hearts 1 felt very natural with the things it did because we didn't know its importance yet. But if we go and add things that allude to, say, Kingdom Hearts 3 and Kingdom Hearts 2 and yada 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 and Kingdom Hearts 1 again, then it'll feel like, oh well, because I played later games, even though this is a remake, I know that they're trying to allude to this future game, and it doesn't hit the same because I don't know what it leads into yet. Seeing that the arc ended up becoming prevalent again, in the Union Cross series and stuff, kind of hit because that seemed like a detail that was, not really a big deal in Kingdom Hearts 1. Also, the point about it being a single standalone game in the series, I also get that point. Kingdom Hearts 1 was made, in a way to where if it didn't do well, then that was just a really good single game. But at the same time, they still added enough throughout the game with its world building and lore, if you pay attention enough, that could be used for future games. So I still feel that that's not really necessary. It just seems like something that people just really want for more fan service for the game. I don't think it's necessary, but you know, I guess I wouldn't be too objective if they did do it. I guess that's just my overall thought on that. And now again, the final point I've seen is the combat is overly simplistic in comparison to the rest of the series. Now, I guess, you know, you could say in retrospect, Kingdom Hearts 1 isn't any Bayonetta. It's not an Astral Chain. It's not DMC or anything like that, I guess. But I think Kingdom Hearts 1 has really solid combat. And while you're not doing crazy, you know, things, running up walls, fighting giant, you know, rock titans, you know, while climbing up mountains and all that kinds of stuff, I do feel like the combat is very, very tight and refined in Kingdom Hearts 1. You know, there's weight behind everything you do, you know, and there's certain advantages to executing the same type of, you know, skill or magic, just in different ways. You know, like I can cast magic on the ground, or I can weave it into my combo, or I can just jump into the air and use my magic that way. Kingdom Hearts rewards you in trying out different things with its combat. You know, sometimes you have to give and take. You only have so much AP after all. So I feel even though you could call it simplistic, I don't think simplistic can really be a flaw. I don't think its simplistic design takes away from what Kingdom Hearts is. You know, I feel it may not have things like shot locks or, you know, or transformations or anything like that, but I still don't think that those all things that the future games did were just additions. You know, it's what makes them special. But I think trying to take away what makes Kingdom Hearts 1 special by adding things from later games, you know, like transformations and stuff, it's like, okay, I can't just go and add Super Saiyan to Kingdom Hearts 1 or something like that just because we get Super Saiyan 2 and Super Saiyan God, you know, in later games. That doesn't make Kingdom Hearts 1 special. It not having any and just focusing on the design of what it does have is what made it so special and, you know, stand out from its later games. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. I think most people who feel that Kingdom Hearts 1's combat is overly simplistic probably didn't use a lot of the later abilities that you end up getting, or maybe even beat the game. Because yeah, while it is more simplistic than later games, I still feel like it is a very, very strong combat system. That's a combat system you wouldn't find in a lot of other action RPGs. So I kind of feel that's disrespectful to Kingdom Hearts 1 in a way to even say that. But I don't know. Overall, do I think Kingdom Hearts 1 needs a remake? No, I don't think so. Would I want a Kingdom Hearts 1 remake? I mean, I guess. I mean, I would just want a new game if I'm real with you. I'm not asking for a Kingdom Hearts 1 remake. You know, I don't think it needs a remake, so I don't necessarily want one. Would I take it if they made it? Oh, of course. Of course, I definitely would. And I'd probably play it more than the original if I'm honest, but I don't necessarily want it. You won't find me asking for it. You know, because anyways, I think remake, if we're remaking any Kingdom Hearts game here, I think Union Cross in the Key series needs one. Just make a Kingdom Hearts Key remake. That's what it needs. And it has the entire story, everything you need to know with Key, you know, and have a great combat system that expands upon Kingdom Hearts 3 and 2, etc., and just make it overall as refined as possible. Will that happen? Probably not. But if they're gonna remake it at all, either I'd like a remake in the style of a, you know, Unreal Engine styled movie. If I can't get a game, remake it as a movie like they did with Days and Recoded, taking those cutscenes and stuff like that and making them at least more presentable and not all DS like. You know, while I still think, you know, you can, if you have a phone, just go and experience the theater mode version of the story, I still feel that getting people to download a mobile app for essential story for this mainly console PC-esque game series is kind of asking for a lot. You know, if people who don't have consoles or PC and only have a phone, the only story they get is Union Cross. So if you're not going to port all the other games to phone too, then you might as well just port its story, you know, the phone exclusive story over to everything else. I think that just makes the most sense. And it's not like Square Enix hasn't put modern games on, you know, phones before. The Trials of Mana remake, you know, that fully 3D action RPG is also on phones. So to think that Kingdom Hearts couldn't run on a phone, I think is kind of silly. If they can run games like Genshin Impact, a super, action-oriented action RPG and stuff, then I think it can run Kingdom Hearts, in my opinion. Phones are really freaking strong nowadays. Would that be the ideal place to play it? Probably not, but the fact that you can use controllers in a lot of these Square ports and stuff like that on mobile, I still think it's fine. But again, if anything needs a remake, it'd be the Key series. So that's my general consensus of it. Kingdom Hearts 1 does not need a remake. I don't necessarily want a remake, but I would take it if we got it. And I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the points people are trying to make about this remake being needed and stuff, but I'm certainly open to hearing you all's thoughts on this. Do you agree with a lot of the points that I made, or do you disagree with a lot of the things that I feel? Maybe you feel something that I don't. Maybe, because all these opinions are subjective anyway, so I'd love to hear some different opinions. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me, or if you have some points that I didn't even point out here, but let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy these types of videos, subscribe to the channel, as I love uploading, as much as I can. I'm working on the next retrospective as we speak, and at the same time I'm trying to get some discussions up in between that. This is a re-recording of this video, so hopefully everything went well and you were able to enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like on the video for my effort, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos from me. But thank you all so much for watching. My name is KingdomAce. Remember, everyone, to play some games, have some fun, and enjoy your day today.